Welcome in, LSU fans. My name is Bryce Koon alongside Glen West here on the Go 24/7 podcast. And you know what? By the time you're listening or watching this, there could be more portal editions. And so I'm just going to go ahead and tell you the best place to be right now is the Go 24/7 message boards. We've got news popping all day, every day, including our new boots on the ground reporter. She wasn't wearing socks though. My daughter Addie was out at the Walmart thing today, and Glenn, we had a good time. And Glenn also got to talk to Brian Kelly. So, Glenn, it's just been a week full of awesome stuff, and LSU is keeping us busy with this portal news.
Yeah, glad Addie could join us and get her feet wet with the beat. She didn't ask any questions today, but that's okay. First time in the building, it's going to be a little tough. So, but yeah, it was great there. It was great. For those who don't know, the Walmart deal that LSU does every year during Christmas time, it's pretty much the whole team, packs up with a bunch of, the kids from the local community, and they go around and they buy them Christmas presents and fill up their carts with a bunch of toys and stuff. So it was really cool to see, just some of the players around and just kind of them interacting with some of the younger kids. And it was a cool day. And certainly while we were there right in the middle of everything, and LSU adds its seventh commit to the transfer portal cycle, and we were scrambling I wouldn't say scrambling. We had an idea that it was coming, but just had to adjust things and kind of get the story out there and for you guys to read. So they add the transfer portal cornerback from Virginia Tech, which is the seventh one of the portal cycle, and I must say, like, they're putting their money where their mouth is right now with this portal, man. They are going out there and getting some high impact dudes, guys that have started in SEC, Big Ten, high Power 5 conference games over the last several years, and very interesting, very entertaining and interesting times to certainly be on the message boards at Go 24/7, because they're, like Bryce said, there's news coming in daily, if not hourly, in terms of just the updates that we're getting and who could be next. And if you're watching this on a late Tuesday afternoon, LSU could very well be at 9 or 10 commitments. I mean, we are rolling through this thing right now, and so we'll see kind of what they are able to do before the Christmas break, and if that's not where they get most of their most of their work done before Christmas, we'll see if that proves to be true.
You mentioned, Glenn, the aggressiveness, and that was something that, for better or worse, fans talked a lot about when Brian Kelly mentioned, I guess it was the Vanderbilt week, we will be aggressive, and then continue to kind of hammer home of this is a team that will be aggressive in the portal. We will spend money and stuff like that. And look, will ultimately be the judge of what they did in this portal cycle when, toe meets leather next fall. We get to watch this 2025 version of LSU take the football field. That'll be the ultimate kind of judge of this. But I like what you said, because at the very least, Brian Kelly is going to go down swinging. And this staff is swinging big right now for a lot of portal targets. And I was talking with several, staff members that not just at LSU, but just in terms of people, in and around the country. And I thought this was interesting too, because we talk about the aggression level of LSU, talking with people about how these visits go. It's very, and I don't know how much you pay attention during that time of year, Glenn. I know both of our teams are not too much fun to watch in the NFC South right now, but NFL free agency, where a guy comes in, you have a quick itinerary of here's A, B, and C of what we've got to do. And for lack of better words, it's pretty much, your positional, how we're going to use you, a quick tour, especially at the college level. Guys want to see that, of the facilities, and then NIL and that compensation aspect. And it's almost like a quick get in, get out. Now, some guys have taken multi-day visits, but a lot of people have talked about that this is really kind of something where it really models the NFL free agency, for better or worse. So I think when you add in the fact that there is a limited amount of time for coaches to build a relationship or, be able to siphon through the good and the bad of potential portal, subjects, it really speaks to that this group has done their homework. They maybe have built a big board somewhere in that room of, if said player goes in the portal, this is what we want. And they're capitalizing on some previous relationships. And I just think it's impressive when we talk about the aggression level that you're near double digits in commits at 7, like we talked about as the time of recording this on Monday evening. And we're only a week into the portal officially being opening. I think it speaks to the preparedness and the readiness of not just the staff, but the support staff, the recruiting staff, and let's just be real, the NIL staff as well.
Yeah, it's very transactional when you get to the portal. I mean, that's just kind of how you have to look at it right now. It's free agency without regulations, and it's very tough to monitor for a college football program right now. But LSU saved its money for this exact reason, and you're seeing here the early results are they've been really strong. And if you go to again, if you're watching this on a Tuesday afternoon or a Wednesday morning, this might be a little outdated because of what we're doing. But if you go to 24/7 sports team rankings right now, as of Monday evening, LSU has the number one transfer portal class, and
Yeah.
they have four stars committed, three stars committed as their seven, and their average grade is around a 90, and that is really really nice work considering all the the transfer portal players that are out there, and there's really no five stars to speak of in this portal cycle. They're all kind of in that 90 to 95 range
Yeah.
in terms of the four stars, but LSU's going out there and they're uh, targeting the guys that they think they have shots with. They're bringing them on campus, and for I must say, the most part, they have been able to reel a lot of those players in. Starting with Bauer Sharp, the tight end, all the way to Delaney here, Mansour Delaney on Monday. So
Yeah.
they're doing a really nice job. I think we're going to get into a little bit more of the specifics of the positions they've targeted here. But just, yeah, wanted to give a shout out there to the early start here because they have 7 commitments in. I don't think they're anywhere close to being done.
Yeah.
And to have the number one portal class right now, it shows you that they're not only recruiting quantity, they're recruiting quality, and they're recruiting guys that can come in and serve major impacts here from day one as a potential team that can make a run at a playoff. So it's been I think as opportunistic and as aggressive as you would have hoped. Sure, there are guys that maybe you swung on and you just, you're not going to get them all, but
Yeah.
they've gotten the majority of the ones that they've really wanted, and done a really nice job of supplementing this roster with guys that not only have experience in playing at the SEC and Big Ten level, but guys that also have eligibility left too beyond next year. And I think
Mhm.
that's a big part of this that LSU has really wanted to find the sweet spot with.
Yeah, no, you're exactly right in a lot of ways what you just said. I think the biggest thing that stands out to me, and it's a perfect segue to talk about some of these players, is that, and I want to use this word lightly, these aren't rebound guys. They're not guys that maybe didn't pan out, and want a fresh start. Now you can make an argument, maybe some injuries derailed what could have been promising. Maybe Jakeem Jackson kind of talks about, that kind of fit. But the most recent guy, Mansour Delane, like that's a guy who has produced at the ACC level and at Virginia Tech. He's been a very good football player for them. You go down the list, a couple of guys that you're capitalizing if you're the player and cashing in per se on playing at a higher level in the SEC, but also LSU's getting some guys who have proven tape instead of potential. And I think that's something that's maybe different focus, not just for LSU, but across college football when they want to allot that NIL money in different places. That's maybe where they're looking. So Glenn, let's take a look at some of these players. We can start maybe on the defensive side of the football, and let's start in the defensive backfield. I already mentioned two of the guys. Jakeem Jackson comes over from Florida. Mansour Delane, obviously the most recent. If you're watching this on Monday night or something like that, Mansour Delane, the most recent transfer from Virginia Tech. Immediately, I see two guys that are 6 foot plus. They're rangy, they're athletic. And Glenn, when I kind of went into maybe a commitment analysis and talked with our own national reporter Cooper Patagna on both of these guys already, and he said these are the kind of guys that you need, and Corey Raymond wants that mold. Raymond has some super young guys that fit that mold coming in this recruiting class: DJ Pickett, Aiden Anding. But now you got guys with college experience. Safe to say that this rebuild of the cornerback room is off to a pretty hot start, especially with the addition of these two guys.
Yeah, it's very exciting. I mean, as of Monday, when they added Jakeem Jackson, and that became official over the weekend, and then obviously with Mansour Delane on Monday, I think that cornerback room is 8 or 9 strong right now. So they not only have some real quality depth, they also have some quantity depth as well. And so they've done a really nice job, whether it's the three freshmen. I mean, you mentioned Aiden Anding and DJ Pickett. Bradford's one of those tweener guys. Jacob Bradford could probably play some corner, probably play some nickel safety for LSU. So he's kind of in that in-between route there. I'm not sure what exactly LSU's plans is with him, but you mentioned those two guys. Like, we got a chance to talk with Brian Kelly today about Jakeem Jackson, and he mentioned the starter experience. He mentioned the fact that when you put on the film, he's not going against high school players, and he didn't play in 2024. But the biggest thing with guys like him is that he has all this eligibility left, so he's not only just a really solid player, but LSU could have him for 2 or 3 years, depending on what happens with him. So, like, there's opportunity for him to not only come in and play and start right away, but have that sustained here over the next couple of years. So you mentioned him, you mentioned Delane, obviously a guy that, coming from Virginia Tech, has a lot of playing experience, long, tall, fits the Corey Raymond mold. Somebody that I think can certainly challenge for a starting spot, is the number 2 cornerback as we're recording this on the 24/7 Sports services. So you add the top 2 corner and a top 10 corner in Jakeem Jackson to go along with what you got in the top 3 or 4 corner and DJ Pickett and Aiden Anding, depending on what services you look at. And then certainly with Jacob Bradford and his ascension, you got Ashton Stamps coming back. You've got PJ Woodland coming back. This cornerback room all of a sudden has a lot of options going into this offseason, and some very exciting ones too. Guys that have a nice mixture of players that have a lot of potential and are thought very highly of, but also some veterans in there that have some playing experience, are going to be able to help get this room back to where it needs to be to make a real push here for the college football playoff.
And then obviously we talked about the corner position, but you look at the safety position as well, where we expect LSU to maybe at least go after and secure at least one commitment back there. The 2 names, obviously, that we've talked a lot about on the board, Zechariah Poisier, who just got off the phone with and talked with him a little bit, and his plans to make a decision by Tuesday, Wednesday at the latest. So maybe if LSU wins the sweepstakes, it's maybe a little Christmas Eve or Christmas present there for Tiger fans. And then obviously they had a kid on campus today there in, I'm going to pronounce the name, Tawfik Biard, I think. I got to go find the pronunciation guide for USF, but the former USF Bull, highly productive G5 player. And we're seeing a common theme with those highly productive G5 players as well. So that's something where LSU is kind of looking in that department. But Glenn, rebuilding the room, and that's what's important. And you feel good about that room, the linebacker room, and let's just talk front 7 here, because look, losing Braden Swinson, Savion Jones, those 2 guys were having a good time today out, shopping Walmart. They're going to be a little more flush with cash here in about, 6-7 months, especially Braden Swinson. You kind of think, can you replace that production? Well, Kevin Peoples got a lot out of those guys in just 1 year. Right now, LSU has added 2 pass rushers to that mix, and Jamari Butler, and then obviously Jack Pyburn, who popped earlier today. Look, I was talking with somebody about Jack Pyburn, and that's a guy who has a high motor. For LSU fans concerned about the reported demands, I was kind of told, for lack of better words, that really wasn't that true, and it was a lot of good conversation between Pyburn and the LSU staff in negotiating, type of deal that he wanted. But it's 2 highly productive guys. We believe LSU may be in on, another guy or something like that. But you pair that with the return of Gabriel Relaford, and Glenn, that room is really starting to mesh well. Veteran experience and a very exciting young edge coming in. Obviously, you have the high school class, but Relaford, I think they're really pumped up to watch him, and they pair him with 2 guys now that have some potential on the field too.
Yeah, you got Relaford, you got Collage Cobbins, who the program is still very high on, and a guy that, probably needs to still add some weight, but could potentially throw himself into the mix next offseason. You've got a couple other guys. Dylan Carpenter is a guy who's been around now for a couple of years in your program, could fill that defensive end mold as well if he's able to develop and turn into a real piece for you. But really, this comes back to the 2 transfers here, because you really needed to replace that veteran presence that you're losing with guys like Jones and Swinson, and I thought they did that really, really well. Butler is a guy, 6'5", 260. I think has like around 7.5 sacks and 17 tackles for loss over his last couple of years. Starting at Nebraska, he's played in a lot of games. He's played in 34 games over the last 3 years, and so he's seen
Yeah.
a lot of football. A guy that I think probably 24/7 was maybe a little bit late to put in the recruiting, the scouting eval on, but yeah, I think he's somebody that can come in and be an immediate contributor for him for LSU next year. I think it's interesting because the way LSU has typically worked, it's usually been on that front line. It's been a defensive end, and then it's been an edge rusher that's maybe not quite as heavy. Pyburn and Butler both run kind of in that 260 range. I'm curious to see what that looks like. Is that going to be kind of your more typical edge, or is that going to be an kind of a hands in the ground defensive end kind of guy? Because both of those guys are both around that 260, 6'3", 6'4", 6'5" range, and so
Mhm.
I'll be very curious to see what they decide with those two. Obviously, they have a plan in place to utilize both of them, but you start talking about Pyburn. He's somebody that didn't have a whole ton of sacks throughout his career, but you can just turn on the film and you can see he's getting into the backfield pretty consistently.
Yes.
He's got a lot of QB pressures to his name, a lot of tackles for loss. Somebody that I think is going to be able to be pretty explosive off the edge, and somebody who's played in the SEC, right? I mean, he's gone up against all these elite offensive lines that the SEC pumps out, and has been able to be a very big factor in all of that. So no surprise there why he's been a top 5 defensive lineman coming into the portal here in this cycle. And you just run down kind of the guys that LSU signed so far. You got a top 5 D lineman, you got 2 top 10 corners, you got the top 10 quarterback who we'll get to in a second here. You got a couple, or you got one top 10 receiver already on board. So like there's they're recruiting at a very high level, and these guys are not coming cheap either. Like, I mean, they're ponying up some good money to get this roster where they feel like it needs to be more competitive in 2025. And so, Brian Kelly spoke with reporters on Monday. He talked about, them not being close to done yet. They still have some work to do at several positions. You mentioned safety. I think the offensive line is another one there that they're going to really target and go after. Maybe they get another receiver. Maybe they look at another tight end that can kind of help come in and fill some depth for them. But the start and the needs that they've filled here in these first 7 commitments and 5 cases signings already, they're hitting on a lot of the positions that they needed to here early in the portal cycle.
Yeah, and they're doing it like we said, and like I said earlier, it's not guys that it didn't work out and they're on their second or third school. These are guys who have been productive and were highly sought after, to Glen's point there. Guys that other teams wanted, and LSU is winning the battle both on the relationship side and on the NIL side. So really like the additions that they've made over there on the defensive side of the football, and obviously we hope to continue to be able to talk about some more additions here in the next week or so. But Glenn, as you flip it over to the offensive side of the football, let's go back to, what was it, last Friday? It's just a long, long time ago, it feels like at this point. Bauer Sharp, the tight end from Oklahoma, who LSU fans got to see up close and personal in Tiger Stadium, throw an interception to a portal entry in Sage Ryan. Bauer Sharp is brought in, the first portal edition, we should say, for LSU. Just your thoughts on Sharp. What stood out to me is that Kelly said he is very physical in the run game, which that should excite a lot of people with the run game struggles that LSU had. Maybe this is a guy who is versatile in catching the ball, but also can put his hand in the ground and can be a little bit of a mauler to help out a run game that needs to be better in 2025.
Yeah, don't know that LSU is going to be asking him to throw many passes in 2025.
That's
I don't
okay.
think
Yeah.
that was a clip maybe they cut from the film evaluation there. But yeah, look, Bauer Sharp is a guy that it runs probably 6'3", 6'4", and then is in that 255, 260 range as well. And somebody that I think LSU is really excited about to get into the building because he it sounds like and you touched on it there. The run blocking is going to be an element that I think LSU is going to try to utilize him as. But the thing that he did at Oklahoma, he led the team in receptions and receiving yards for an Oklahoma passing offense that was really non-existent for most of the year. I mean, he had, you look at the numbers, 42 catches for around 330 yards. Those aren't eye-popping numbers or anything like that, but I think what he'll be more than anything is And we hated to put this term on Mason Taylor because he was really dynamic player and got a guy who could turn, upfield for a lot of big plays. But he can be a good safety net, I think, for Garrett
Yeah.
Nussmeier. Like he kind of fits more of that mold to me. A guy that when Nussmeier is looking downfield and he doesn't have anything, where's Bauer Sharp? All right, let me just check it down to him. Stay ahead of the chains. I think he's going to be that kind of player for LSU in the passing game, and you just hope that he can be more than serviceable at the run blocking thing and at the run blocking aspect of things. So I thought it was a really solid pickup. Obviously, LSU was in on Luke Haas. They missed out on Haas, but I don't think you're getting a guy with SEC experience, a guy who's played in a full SEC schedule. And look, Oklahoma's schedule is not easy this year either. They had some pretty big gauntlet games throughout the course of their season. So just getting somebody like that who's proven he can play at this level and contribute, even if it's not going to be that 600-yard kind of season with 7 touchdowns for the tight end. I don't think that's really what LSU needs. They don't need another Mason Taylor because I do think they are going to be returning and they have added some really explosive weapons to this offense. It's just somebody that can continue to stay ahead of the chains, move the offense forward, and then help out in the blocking game as well.
Yeah, I think it's a solid pickup, and I think it doesn't block what they want to do with Trey'Dez Green, and we'll obviously see where does Trey'Dez Green fit into the 2025 version of LSU. That's a massive storyline. Do they want to slot him out at the receiver position? If they add another receiver, will they pull him back into the tight end room? And I think that's one of the more things that I'm going to be watching during the Texas Bowl. Like, how does Trey'Dez Green fit into what Joe Sloan? Do we get a preview of what that could look like? And also, it'll be interesting to see about any receivers that they bring back in 2025. And one name that hit the portal, and we kind of linked to LSU pretty early on, and I got excited watching the highlights the other night. Barian Brown, the transfer from Kentucky. Glenn, this is a guy that is explosive, and it feels like LSU could field a receiving core of guys who might be on the smaller side, but man, you don't want to play man defense against this group because you're probably going to get beat. One of these guys is going to get loose. Talk a little about Barian Brown and what you're feeling on him, and just in terms of not just the offense, but the return game as well, where he's been one of the country's best since he's been in college.
Yeah, I think he has 5 kick return touchdowns in his career over the first couple seasons with Kentucky. This is one where I think LSU fans are really going to fall in love with quickly because of that explosiveness. That was the first word when we asked Brian Kelly about him today. On Monday during the Christmas deal that they had with the team at Walmart. He talked about the explosiveness. He talked about the veteran presence, the maturity that he'll bring to that room. But man, he's you just turn on the film and like there's a 36-minute video on YouTube and it was circulating on social media too of just really all of his catches, all of his returns, all of his highlights. And when he hits that second gear, he's as tough as anybody to slow down and bring back and bring down. And so I think, he had a little bit of a down year production wise. I don't think that was because of his play. I think it was because their offense at Kentucky this year was frankly just not very good, especially their passing offense. And so he had, I believe it was around 350 yards and a couple touchdowns offensively. But, he's somebody that I think is really going to build a lot of, chemistry with Nussmeier. I think he's somebody that you look at next to Chris Hilton should he return and stay healthy. Those two kind of being your big time vertical threats. What I really liked about Barian Brown's film though is that he's not just that burner down the field. They like to get him in the middle of the field in those intermediate routes, get him the ball, let him go make some plays, make some guys miss in the second level. And so I think this is going to be a really, really big time addition for this passing offense. And we'll see kind of what that looks like in the spring. But somebody that I think LSU fans should be really excited about. I think he was a top 6 or 7 portal wide receiver because I think that's one of the deeper positions in the portal this year. Mm-hmm. I wouldn't be a bit surprised if we're having a conversation a year from now and Barian Brown was highly underrated in that grouping. I think he's going to be a really explosive player for LSU next year.
Yeah, Kentucky struggled offensively this year. He had a guy 2 years ago in Devin Leary that transferred in from NC State, was very, I don't want to say a stat stuffer, but that was a quarterback that liked to air the ball out. This year they had Georgia transfer Brock Vandegrift. The passing game really wasn't there, so when you look at the stats, maybe a little misleading. But he was productive as about as you can be within an offense that
Didn't
was
he
one of
have
the
Will Levis
SEC's
in his true
worst.
freshman year, or was that, or was Levis a little bit?
His true freshman year would have been Levis's. Gosh,
Or
probably yeah. Levis's
maybe,
senior year. I'd have
yeah.
to go back and double check the
I
dates, but
thought
it would have been
I thought I
Levis.
had seen that Levis was his quarterback, maybe his freshman year, and that was when he was his most productive. And
Oh
so,
yeah. So you
I
look at
thought,
that.
if you got Nussmeier back there, I think most people here would say that Nussmeier as a thrower is probably as good as anybody that Marion Brown's ever played with. And so, we'll see if that chemistry evolves and develops. And just sticking with the wide receiver group here, we'll see if there's not another big splash here coming in the very near future for LSU. I think there's something in the works, but we'll see if they can kind of get over the finish line.
Just some awesome breaking news right here on the podcast, Glenn.
Oh.
Jay Johnson said, "Don't one up me, Brian Kelly. The tiger emoji has come out to play just here recently, literally as of 5 minutes ago. But in all seriousness, Jay Johnson said, I want some press too. So LSU baseball also cooking up some things as well. So I thought that was funny. I throw that on there. Someone tagged me in it on Twitter. Let's go to the final piece that has been, I think when we talk about, and we've said this so much over the past year, Glenn, if LSU was going to bring in a quarterback, it was going to have to be a guy that understood that this wasn't a guaranteed starting spot. We said that last year. Understood that you're going to compete, but maybe the hope is that you don't win the job. They really want Garrett Nussmeier to be the guy. LSU goes out and adds a guy that is very intriguing. I was watching some of his film last night. Michael Van Buren Jr., a guy that was uber talented coming out of high school out of St. Francis out there in Baltimore. For high school football fans, they went toe-to-toe, his team did, with DeSoto, who won a state title out there in Texas. And this is a kid that was thrust into a starting spot this past year at Mississippi State. And let's just be real, Mississippi State, the worst team in the SEC this year. Jeff Levy trying to rebuild things over there in Starkville. And he was thrust in the role, and Glenn, he comes out against the SEC champions on the road and throws for over 300 yards and looks the part in terms of the freshman. Now, he had his ups and downs, but this is a guy who is very athletic. I think it's getting more to what LSU wants in terms of a guy that isn't afraid to run the ball. I mean, he can run the ball, an electric arm. Michael Van Buren Jr., not to be confused with U.S. President Martin Van Buren. Someone tweeted me that. I was like, I don't think I was confusing that, but I appreciate it. But in all seriousness, LSU goes and gets a quarterback that you kind of hinted this earlier. Prime example of you're set for now at the quarterback position and hopefully for the future with the addition, as Sonny has coined him, as MVB.
Yeah, look, I think the initial reaction that I had was this could not have been a more ideal fit for LSU in terms of what they were looking for and needed out of the transfer portal. You're talking about a guy who's got 3 years of eligibility left, is athletic, has some great physical traits that I think can be developed over the next year. And then the second part of this was, I think LSU this portal cycle wanted to bring in somebody that could compete with Garrett Nussmeier. I'm not saying that Van Buren's going to go in there and beat out Nussmeier for the starting job, but I think that LSU last year, because Nussmeier had stayed so loyal and dedicated, they felt like they didn't need him looking over his shoulder his first year as a starter. And so I think it was important for them to come in this year and go after a transfer guy that will push Nussmeier and that will make him better and that will look at it in the future and say, hey, we might not get he might not get the playing time in 2025, but if you're looking ahead to 2026 and 2027, if this guy develops the way that LSU hopes he will, could be a very real contributor in the SEC for years to come. And all of a sudden you're in a position here, if you're LSU, where you're right back to having a really strong quarterback room, not only just for next year but for the future and looking forward. So like you'll have Van Buren competing with Nussmeier. Colin Hurley will certainly be there in the mix as well. He'll be going into his second year as a player, as a passer here for them. And look, I think this is going to be a really interesting one to watch, kind of develop over the offseason, see, get check-ins with how he's developing, how he's looking in spring ball and in the summer, certainly going into the fall. Because I think he's somebody that, is a little bit more mobile, certainly than Nussmeier, but kind of the guy that I think, if LSU really is looking at itself in the mirror is kind of the prototype quarterback that you want this in college football these days. The guy that can make some plays with his legs, but also not be afraid to sit back there and throw it and sling it around to a bunch of different guys. So we'll see kind of what happens with him. I think he had about 170 yards rushing this year when it's not sack adjusted. Like the sacks, I think he was sacked a ton at Mississippi State, and so I think he ended up with like negative rushing yards this year because of how much he was sacked. But he also had some really nice scrambles and some gains, and he had 5 touchdown rushes too. So somebody that I think LSU fans should be really excited about in the future. But we're not going to say that he's going to be your starting quarterback in 2025, but he'll definitely make a push, and he'll be competitive. He'll get some opportunities, and I'm going to be very excited to see what he does with them.
Yeah, me too. And I was going back and watching, and I even talked to some of my good buddies who cover Georgia and just their thoughts on it. And they were like, some of the conversation, even from some of the, Georgia players after the game was like, that kid, he's electric. And like, he made us look bad on some things. And when you talk about a defense for Georgia that was one of the best in the country this year, I think that's an encouraging sign that it wasn't all just being overwhelmed for him at the college level in year one. And you mentioned that, like, I can't wait to get into spring ball, and we kind of, maybe during the winter we tap into some sources, and during spring ball we kind of get a look at, look, we know what we would need to see Garrett Nussmeier, but hey, how's he coming along? Because you have a succession plan right now if you're LSU, and that's what they wanted when Jaden stayed and Garrett wanted to stay, and that worked. Ricky Collins enters the portal. You've got AJ Swan, you've got Colin Hurley.
Well, let's not dance around the bush here. Like, this is what they wanted with
this is what they wanted to
Underwood. This is what they wanted with Bryce Underwood. Like, they wanted a succession plan for behind Nussmeier. The Underwood thing fell apart. It is what it is. You move on. You got to just roll with the punches. And I think LSU, like I said, did about as good of a job as they could have hoped for in terms of adding a quarterback in this offseason to this roster that is going to be around not only for next year, but for years to come, and see if he can't develop into a starter and be a really high caliber starter. Because I think the physical traits and the tools, at least from what I've seen and watching some of his film, it's there. It needs to be polished. It needs to be developed further by this offensive staff. But there's a lot of really exciting things, I think, to look forward to with Michael Van Buren.
I agree indeed. All right, Glenn, we don't want to absolutely we don't want to, not that we're spoiling things, but we don't want to leak too much of the tea leaves here. That's a good reason for you to come hang out at Go 24/7 and get that 50% off subscription. But what do you expect next? Because the Tigers are not done, and we can just kind of talk about this because it's pretty well reported. Nick Anderson is a really big target that they would love to get in to be an outside receiver for them. We talked about, I hinted at the safety position as well between Poisier and the other young man from the USF. I think that one thing we haven't really talked about is, the offensive line and defensive line, Glenn. So I'll kind of let you talk about that, because I'll say this. I think the defensive line market hasn't materialized as maybe people have wanted to. And look, folks, you got to understand that is going to be a premium. Top-notch defensive linemen are not going to enter the portal, and if they are, they're going to get a lot of money. So I think it's interesting to see that, and obviously, Braylon, and his last name is it Moore? Braylon Moore is a guy that LSU's had on campus, the interior offensive lineman for Virginia Tech. The thought is maybe you could get him at center. You could slide DJ Chester to a more natural fit at the guard spot. What else are you expecting here? I know I kind of highlighted a lot there, but what else do you think you want to see and maybe we might see?
Yeah, you just got Moore's teammate Delane on as part of this thing too. So maybe that you can make that kind of pitch and that angle that he won't be alone in terms of coming from a roster that with a good teammate or friend of his. So we'll see. Like I think that the two biggest positions here that LSU has not addressed yet are the offensive line and safety positions, and I think we'll start to learn some more of those tea leaves here over the next 48, 72 hours. There'll be decisions coming in. You mentioned the Jacksonville State safety, Zachariah Poisier. Sounds like he'll be making a decision here pretty soon. But look, I think from LSU's perspective, what they've done so far as they've attacked the edges on the defensive line. I think when you mention defensive line, we got to be more specific, and defensive tackle is where I think LSU is where LSU could look to add another guy. And I don't know that it's it's a need, but I don't know that it's a must. And like I think when I look at some of these other positions, like offensive line, like safety, those are must positions right now for me. Like interior defensive line, you just look at what you got coming back between Jacoby and Guillory, obviously Dominic McKinley and Ahmad Bro. You're hoping to make two are two guys that make big leaps in their second off season with the program. And then you've got 4 freshmen that they just signed in this class. So like all of a sudden you're looking at 7 guys, 8 guys that could really come in and challenge and all compete for playing time. But you probably could want to use to add. You probably want to add one more interior guy if the right fit comes along. And you mentioned it that the market right now, I don't know that it's robust with interior defensive linemen or guys that we'll see kind of what LSU was thinking there, but right now, for me, I'm looking hard at the offensive line. I'm looking hard at safety and just kind of what other positions you could address outside of those two. Maybe you add another tight end.
Yeah.
I think we're winding down here. I think we're on the other side of kind of what they needed to address, and I think we're over the halfway mark of look. You got the cornerbacks, you've got receiver pretty well covered. We'll see what happens with Anderson. You got the quarterback. You've got the tight end that you really need to kind of help be a veteran presence for you. So I really look at offensive line and safety as the 2 spots here where we just don't have a whole lot of finality yet with what they wanted to do. So those are the 2 that I'm looking at hard over the next week to see if LSU can't reel in a couple of big fish at those positions as well. And you kind of mentioned there with the center, if that is the way that LSU goes with this, and they're able to add more to the mix. You look at DJ Chester at guard. You still got Weston Davis and Tyree Adams. I think could be your guys that you're looking hard at tackle. You still got Paul Mubanga. You just signed 3 or 4 guys in this freshman class, and Solomon Thomas is going to be competing for playing time. I think Carius Kern will come in and compete for playing time. So I think they have some bodies, and they spent these last 2 freshman classes wanting to address that offensive line, knowing that they were going to be losing this veteran group that had been starting for you for 3 years. So getting a veteran presence in here to maybe anchor the middle of this thing makes a lot of sense to me. And then we'll see what happens here. But look, I think what are your thoughts? Like, do you think LSU's kind of on the other end of addressing a lot of their needs? Like I look at offensive line and safety as the 2 really that stand out. Maybe punter. Maybe they go out and get a punter.
Yeah.
That could be like another on the edges kind of move.
Yeah, and I think it's something to keep in mind too, because the portal is going to stay open longer for these teams that are in the playoff. And we've seen some guys jump into the portal during a playoff run, and I'll just kind of say that's kind of frowned upon at a lot of places. Like, you're going to have your individual players that do that, but if there's a player on a playoff roster that is going to join, that's not going to potentially happen with the national championship game being on January 20th until middle to late January. So I think, to your point, is it going to be this continued frenzy all up until January 20th or before winter workouts start? No, it's not going to be like that. I do agree with your sentiment that we're probably over the big hump. LSU wanted to make a splash. They wanted to make it early. They wanted to get their guys in. And we're going to see this market start to kind of maybe teeter out a little bit or balance itself out as we get deeper into the portal. So kudos for LSU doing that. So I do agree with your point. Offensive line, I think they're going to add there. It would shock me to not see them add at least one guy to play safety next year for them. And then, other positions, like, is there a running back that wants to come in as a 1-year opportunity? Is there a tight end, to your point? It's more of kind of, I would say, not trimming the fat, but working around the edges of the roster. The meat and potatoes of this roster, I think, have largely been filled in terms of the first week or so of the portal. I think that's kind of, Glenn, the sentiment I would echo.
Yeah, I think so. And look, we'll see. Maybe there's, I think running back is an interesting one just in terms of what happens with Caleb Jackson. I think if he leaves, which he still hasn't entered the portal or anything.
He was there today. Yeah.
He was there today. I don't know that you really need to go after a running back if he's the one that stays, but if he does over the next, 12 days decide that he wants to enter the portal, then maybe you take a look. But I think they've done a really nice job of addressing a lot of the needs at this position, or a lot of the positions and needs.
Mhm.
And now it's just about sanding the edges and figuring out, like, getting over the hump with the safety group, getting over the hump with offensive line, and just I think rolling from there. I think they've done a pretty decent job so far.
Hey, and get ready for the Texas Bowl, where Baylor just announced they're wearing white uniforms. So I'm sure the LSU media and the people will handle it all, in good faith when LSU rolls out there in gold or purple jerseys.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm sure that'll go well. But hey,
Black. Let's throw out some black jerseys, huh? Let's go completely away from the colors.
let's just wear something crazy, all
Yeah.
highlighter yellow. Why not?
Mardi Gras jerseys.
There you go. I like that. I like that. It's gonna be fun. Hey, we appreciate you tuning in. A little bit longer podcast. We had to catch you up on everything you needed to know. And if you want to stay in the loop, in all seriousness, there's not a better crew of myself, Glen West, and Sonny Ship, keeping you updated literally up to the minute and hour news of what's happening with LSU in the transfer portal. Come join us. 50% off you that deal you can get, that subscription. It's going to be a great time. You're going to have a good time. And obviously, we're just talking about basketball. We're talking about football. We're talking about baseball season that is going to be here very, very quickly as well. And if you're watching this podcast, we appreciate you as well. Make sure you hit that like button, subscribe to the YouTube channel. And if you're listening on those platforms, make sure you give us a follow over there as well. He is Glen West. My name is Bryce Koon. LSU is on fire in the transfer portal, and we can't wait to talk to you again here on the Go 24/7 podcast.